That goes for everybody. If you, I'll explain the training and the process of getting started with IV ozone and what that means. But whether it's insurance, whether it's compliance, whether it's safety, whether it's whatever, like I am your resource. I know a lot about this stuff. And if I don't know it, I know somebody who knows it. So please just use me as a resource. You'll get an email at the end of this training session, and and you'll be able to respond to me from that. So usually what I do here is we're going to go through our presentation, then we're going to kind of open up to more of a Q&A and just discussion opportunity. And from there, I'll just field questions. If you don't know who I am, I'm Mike. I work with ozone therapy equipment. I've really helped in popularizing this therapy in the United States. It's not like exclusively me, but I've been a part of it in some manner or another for the past 15 years, and then started my own company about 8 years ago. So through our ripple effect of what we've done, 10,000 more doctors have been added to ozone therapy in some capacity. That includes aesthetics, injections, and then through that ripple effect as well, hundreds of thousands of patients have received some sort of ozone therapy treatment, and that is across a lot of different disciplines and practices, but has had a pretty significant impact. And most of that's based on education and just helping people to understand ozone therapy better. That was kind of the big gap, was there was a lot of research and a lot of resources all over the place, scattered around the world. So really what I did is I took that information and read almost all of it, which takes a very long time, and then try to as much condense that into very simplistic language that we can all understand and use on a day-to-day basis. So that's really what it was. A lot of the information around ozone therapy does not come from me. It is because I have read or have experience with clinics or something up that alley that I can take and condense and turn into information that's useful for people. So, and really what kind of spurred my drive into natural medicine was my brother, who had a glioblastoma, a rare form of brain cancer. And this is kind of the passion side. So my brother had brain cancer, diagnosed at 18 with this, and essentially went through the conventional system of things, right? Like a lot of people do, and went through Johns Hopkins, which is a very prestigious organization for cancers. And he lived past 5 years, and they basically said at that point, most of our patients are dead within 5 years, and we don't know what to do. So that turned into a lot of experimentation, trying different drugs, doing things that may or may not work, but let's see what happens here, a little bit of our guinea pig. And he had lost a lot of his critical thinking processes through multiple open brain surgeries. And so my family had to become somewhat of an advocate for him. And it was difficult because he was still in the paradigm of conventional medicine. But as we could, we tried to rope him into other things. But that led me and my family to kind of research alternatives in this natural world. You know, started with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and then all of a sudden ozone therapy, and then all these different things that we're doing. So that kind of is what fueled the passion. And then I've spent over 5,000, 6,000 hours on the phone talking with people about ozone therapy. And that ranges from the patients to the doctors to the researchers, and just all sorts of people in different phases with ozone therapy, learning about it. So I have a lot of experience talking and communicating with people on the subject. So I own Simply O3, which is an ozone therapy company. We do equipment and training for doctors. We do more than that, but that's as far as you guys are concerned, is what we're doing. So I'm a health nut first, and then have turned into more of a business guy, because I understand, hey, to get the word out, to get more people involved with this thing that I find that, in my opinion, is super, super beneficial, I need to understand how to make a business, how to make a structure, and how to make an organization, get other people on fire and excited about this, align ourselves with other people. So I've turned more into a business guy as things has gone, but my history is really just kind of the passion work of this. And my goal in life, if I had to kind of put it into one statement, is to reduce suffering in the world. And so the capacity that I'm doing that now is through non-toxic medicine. And I'm a family guy. My wife and I have 4 kids. They're 7, 6, 3, and 1. So pretty young and busy, but it's a blast. So all right. So as far as you guys are concerned, what does it look like to actually get up and started with ozone therapy? Well, here's an easy 3-step process, just to simplify it. You're in train right now. So the only purpose of this training is to give you enough information to buy the equipment. And then once you buy the equipment, we do a one-on-one hands-on that you just contact us, let us know, hey, I need to do my one-on-one. I want hands-on training. Or if from this training and the resources that you'll get after this, like the course, you feel enough to go through with it, then go for it. But we're essentially giving you an overview. From there, we buy the equipment. From there, we do a one-on-one. And then the third phase there is grow, which is essentially, hey, how do I get sales? How do I market this thing? How do I talk about it? What are some of the compliance things? And from there, we do have a guide that kind of walks through some of the sales marketing and a little bit of compliance with it. But we actually have just, Landon actually knows, with IV launch, they're going to give all of our people 30 days of free marketing, and their job is to get people in the door for you, which they have an amazing offer. I trust their organization and what they're doing because I kind of understand it a little bit, but there's some things essentially that will come a couple months after doing ozone therapy that you can take and plug into your business that are going to help to dial it up. So train, buy the equipment, do the one-on-one, and then we'll get into the growth phase a couple months later. So what is ozone therapy? Well, in this context, we're just talking about IVs. We're not going into all the different capacities that it can be used, but the basic protocol for doing IV ozone therapy. And in my opinion, this is the best protocol. You'll see a lot of different protocols out there, whether that's EBU or 10-pass or all that stuff. Don't worry about that. The most research is done on this protocol, and I think it's the best for the most amount of people. Now, as you get started and as you get more into the world of ozone therapy, you can start to branch off and find other things that make sense for your clinic. But usually I just try to get people started with something simple, and this is really simple. So you stick the patient, you draw out 200 ml of blood, and then into that bag, you infuse 200 ml of ozone gas. The blood is going to turn bright red, which is a great visual for the patient. It's not actually due to the ozone gas, though. It's due to the oxygen binding to the hemoglobin. So the oxygen turns the blood bright red, great visual, and then you drip it back to the patient, and the total process takes about 40 minutes. And a good IV nurse can run 2, maybe max 4 chairs at a time. So you can be pretty efficient with this whole thing. It's not super hands-on. And if you're already doing IVs, it's extremely simple. So isn't ozone dangerous, though? You know, that's the thing that a lot of us have been told, or we have little bits of information about. And that really comes from the pollution, right? So we know about ozone as a pollutant, that it is harmful to the lungs. Nobody argues that. Everybody agrees, yeah, breathing in prolonged doses of ozone or high doses of ozone is going to be harmful to the lungs. And the reason for that is because there's no antioxidant defenses in the lungs. Whereas in other parts of the body, like the blood, there's an antioxidant buffering system. So the ozone goes in, interacts with the antioxidants, is broken down, and that creates a cascade effect. So the biochemistry of ozone is really well established. We've been studying this for about 60 years, starting with Dr. Velio Bacci, who was the father of ozone therapy, and really laid the scientific groundwork for all these other scientists to take part in. So that's kind of the first thing I would say. We know the biochemistry, we understand it. We know there's an antioxidant threshold. We know what those are, and we dose under them. So we understand how ozone interacts with different parts of the body extremely well. With the pollutant, that is taking one thing about ozone and saying, because you cannot breathe it, it is therefore not good in any other part of the body, Well, that's not the case. And, you know, there's a lot of things like that. Like you can't suck in a gallon of water into your lungs and be healthy, right? That goes into your stomach. And that's the same thing with ozone. It can be applied to certain parts of the body, but not to others. Secondly, I would say it's approved in over 20 countries. And at one point it did make it through FDA safety standards. So it's kind of an interesting story with the FDA safety standards. There was this company called Vasogen who spent $225 million researching ozone therapy. And this was funded by a bunch of investors who came together, and they found this company and were like, hey, we want something to make a return on our money on. So they go, okay, well, ozone therapy is a good therapy. And then the investors go, well, we want to make big money. Go for the biggest thing you can think of. So they go for chronic heart failure stage 3. So they got through stages 1 and 2 of the FDA safety standards, which says, hey, this thing is safe and this thing is effective. When it got to stage 3 of the FDA safety standards, they found, oh, this doesn't really reverse the damage that has already happened in chronic heart failure stage 3. And once they put out those reports, all the investors pulled out because they're not going to make the big bucks from it. and the company folded. So they could have pushed through stage 3 if they wanted to. It just wasn't getting the results that they were anticipating. But along the way, what that did for us, that's very advantageous, is we have all this research, all these studies, all these process patents that we can go back to and verify the safety of ozone therapy. So along the way, they also found it to be beneficial, a lot of other stuff. The third thing I would say is clinical reports. There was one really good clinical report on IV ozone therapy where they assessed over 300,000 IV ozone treatments, and they found an adverse event rate of 6 in 100,000. So that means it was essentially safer than the use of aspirin. And the adverse event rate, they mentioned that oftentimes it was actually due to using heparin in contraindicated patients. So patients already on blood thinners and things of that nature. The fourth thing is there's over 2,000 medical studies that have been done on ozone therapy, and those really range in credibility, right? You have your double-blind placebos, credible organizations putting together a study and in assessing ozone therapy. And then you go all the way down to a doctor in their clinic assessing 5 patients, just observing what they found. And so there is a range of credibility here, but the thing that really speaks to me beyond just the double-blind placebos, the double-blind studies, is that you have multiple isolated groups that are not, in cohorts with each other, that are not studying together. You have Russia, Germany, Cuba, Spain, United States, all these different groups that are studying ozone therapy and coming to the same conclusions, which is that it's helpful and that it's safe. I keep on forgetting to do this slide, but it's supposed to be over 10 million treatments done per year, and that's in the United States, Canada alone. That is looking at dentistry, aesthetics, joint regeneration, and IV and home use. So that is across multiple categories. But I think what you're gathering from that is that ozone therapy is incredibly safe for use because it's running quite well. I'm going to skip this slide. So what does it do? What is ozone therapy actually doing into the body that we think is beneficial? So the first thing I would say is that it's working with the immune system. It's not an immune booster. It's not an immune suppressor. It's an immune modulator. So what that means is if you have an overperforming immune system, like an autoimmune disorder, ozone is going to help to quiet that down and correct it to where it needs to be. And on the flip side, if you have somebody that's immunosuppressed, immune burdened, say a cancer patient who's immune burdened or immunosuppressed, it helps to bring their immune system up. And that's the ideal thing for a therapy. And it's really, really, really good at doing that. But essentially, you want a balanced immune system that is functioning appropriately, not just an immune boost, not just an immune suppressant, because that's going to allow the body to autocorrect many other issues within the body. The second thing I would say is oxygen efficiency. So there's oxygen that we're breathing into our lungs, right? But there's a difference between that and how well our cells are taking that oxygen and converting it to energy. And there's a spectrum on which this happens. So when we're born, we have very high oxygen efficiency. And as we age, that decreases. But with ozone therapy, what it does is it actually makes our cells more capable of converting that oxygen into ATP. So AKA, it's metabolizing and improving our metabolism so that we have more energy. The third thing is microcirculation. Now, this sounds kind of benign. It's like, oh, blood flow, cool. You've probably seen a lot of different products and a lot of different things out there that have the dark field microscope where they're looking at the blood flow and it's showing, before doing this treatment, it was stagnant. And after doing this treatment, you can see the blood flow. Those are great visuals. I would say ozone therapy is a next level microcirculation improvement. And the reason for that is because with peripheral vascular disease that's so severe that you have necrotizing tissue, nutrients are not getting exchanged at the cell level, it actually reverses that. So peripheral vascular disease, ozone therapy does wonders with because it's such a powerful stimulator of microcirculation. And that's not just, our fingers and toes. That accounts for the brain, that accounts for the organs, that accounts for the spine. So if you're improving microcirculation, you're getting better nutrient and gas exchange, which is what needs to happen for the cells to get the nutrients they need and to offload the byproduct that they have. The fourth thing is it mitigates oxidative stress, which is what I find to be the most interesting thing about ozone therapy. The reason is because it's an oxidant. So how can an oxidant actually mitigate oxidative stress? Well, what happens with ozone say we put it into the blood, we're actually stimulating a mild acute oxidative stress, right? We're producing some free radicals, some reactive oxygen species, some lipid peroxides within the blood. And so, and that's the same thing, the same process that we do in exercise, sauna, ice baths. We stimulate a mild acute oxidative stress. But what that does is then the body responds with a healing response and says, hey, you need to create antioxidant enzymes. And so you see an upregulation of antioxidant enzymes when you do ozone therapy. And that's wonderful for cell protection. That mitigates oxidative stress, which is theorized to be the leading cause of aging and disease. So theoretically, we're also mitigating that process, and it makes our bodies healthier. So, and it does that through what is called the NRF2 pathway. There are different forms of oxidative stress. Smoking a cigarette is not a healthy form of oxidative stress that's going to respond with a healthy response. Whereas like exercise, sauna, ice baths, ozone therapy are forms that are healthy that stimulate the NRF2 pathway. It's the mild acute oxidative stress that is important. And in turn, it mitigates the chronic oxidative stress. So who does it help? Well, these are kind of the three big categories, and we're talking about IV ozone therapy here. The first thing I would say is chronic disease. That's kind of my history in this, is working with people who have chronic diseases or doctors who are working with patients that have chronic diseases. And the five most common, and I'm not saying that ozone therapy is necessarily the best for these, but what the market has chosen to use ozone therapy for is cancer, Lyme, autoimmune diseases, mold toxicity, and infectious diseases. So those are the five biggest categories in which ozone therapy is applied. And from there, there's a lot of stuff that it's used for. You might have macular degeneration, age-related macular degeneration, viral diseases, bacterial infections, all sorts of stuff. It's very, and I would say the reason, we kind of see something and your flags pop up like, well, how does this thing work for so many different things, right? And you might go to a conference, you see something that has a list of 100 things. Well, the reason that you can say that is because it's working with these very fundamental processes within the body. And ozone therapy is very powerful at doing that. So when you work with the fundamental underlying processes of the body, and the body begins to perform better, well, that's going to result in a wide variety of things. So it really blows my mind that, oh, there's stroke patients that benefit. There's patients with gangrene that benefit. It's like, how do you kind of match those two things together? Well, ozone is working with the underlying causes and the fundamental processes, which in turn makes a healthier body. And a healthy body is more capable of fighting disease than any drug. And I'm not saying there's not a place for drugs, but the point I'm making is you want your body to be healthy because it's going to perform its best. So the second thing is performance enhancement. And these people, athletes, that kind of thing, we have a number of professional athletes who use it and use the equipment. They'll do the IVs, they'll do some of the home stuff. It really helps with oxygen efficiency. So let's say, just for example, you do a 10-minute workout, and normally you have an experience of significant fatigue at the 5-minute mark. Well, if you do ozone therapy, you'll probably have that same experience, but it's going to happen instead at the 7-minute mark. So your oxygen efficiency is improved, you're metabolizing better, and you're fatiguing less quickly. So it can be really helpful for performance enhancement, especially stamina athletes. So soccer players, cyclists, triathletes, those kind of people have a huge benefit from ozone therapy. The third thing is biohacking and anti-aging. Because it's working with all these things, clearing up brain fog, mitigating the oxidative stress. So, theoretically, we're reducing the curve at which you age and those kinds of things. And biohacking people just do all sorts of stuff. So we've been getting roped in with that crowd a lot more lately, but it's been pretty beneficial for people that are just facing kind of midline symptoms, not quite into the chronic disease diagnosis, the bloating, the brain fog. Things of that nature can be really helpful and start to clear up and get the body running again. All right, so I have a short video here. It's about a minute, but these are some of testimonials that I grabbed. The first one is one of my favorites, and then I just want to show you guys. There's hundreds of testimonials on my website under the products that you can go and see. There's thousands online. I probably have like 20 videos like this. I just clipped together 3 very briefly so that you guys can see it real quick.
As a massive stroke, giant clot right up in my brain, my vocabulary, all the English language, writing, reading, even math problems, and my entire right side of my body was paralyzed. And they wanted to do a case study on me because I can talk. When I do ozone, my vocabulary comes back.
I found out we both had mold in our bodies. Lives were like a roller coaster we never got on voluntarily. First time she went to an ozone therapy session, she went to a med spa and had one session, and she came out of there in the parking lot and said, "Mom, my derealization has dissipated for the very first time." And as you can see, I'm actually able to put sentences together. I don't have a problem recalling words anymore. She no longer has nausea. She no longer has her headaches. Ozone, just like Dave Asprey, has been the key to our healing, and I cannot recommend it enough.
I was diagnosed with MS in 2012. I was nursing in the emergency department, and I was like malfunctioning. I had to go on sick leave. I couldn't manage life, and that realized we couldn't get pregnant. And so insert ozone therapy. And within 6 weeks, I was expecting a baby. So this is Micah. Remember I told you about him? This is really quite, an exciting moment.
Man, I like to joke. I didn't know when I signed up for ozone therapy, I signed up to cry all the time because I've had like thousands of interactions with this, like with patients. And it's incredible what it does. I mean, Amber gains her life back. Her ability to move and speak is such a big thing. She's a wife and a mother and a friend and able to carry on with life as she was before. Or mold toxicity, she said she wasn't able to go. I don't know if that was in this clip, but she said basically I wasn't going out anymore because I was embarrassed because I was constantly fumbling over my words. I was in bed a lot of the time, and it was like the lights flipped on and I had my life back. And then Lisa, that was a really cool call that actually just happened maybe a month and a half ago. But we were on the call. It was our first time doing a call together, and it was for something business related. So I wasn't expecting it, which is what made it special. But she essentially was like, brought her 2 kids out and was like, introduced her kids. And I'm like, oh, cool. They're cute kids, And then she started to cry and said, I found your stuff like 8 years ago. I had gone through like a decade of trying to, I was infertile. I had gone through like a decade, lots of money trying to figure out how I can have kids. And once I started doing ozone, I was able to have kids. And so these stories are super important for you guys to not only remember, but to record, because you're going to have stories like this that you can share with your patients, but stories engage with our mind in a very different way. So I just explained the benefits to you guys, but how much further does it go for Amber to say what she said, or this picture down in the left-hand corner for you to visibly see the results with an autoimmune condition? It engages our mind in such a way that we associate with them. So I would highly recommend you as practitioner, have your stories, do recordings. I was even just at a conference and there was one guy that started to talk about his experience with ozone. And I was like, hey, do you mind if I record you and we can just have our conversation, but the camera will be on? And he goes, yeah, of course. Just make it super simple. Pull out your phone, and it's really beneficial for other people to be able to understand ozone therapy and the benefits from there. So contraindications, I need to make the slide a little bit better. The big ones, because we're using heparin, anticoagulants, so blood thinners and things like that, prescription blood thinners. If you as a practitioner are able to wean them off that, and do ozone therapy, maybe put them back on a little bit, that's up to you. But if they're currently on blood thinners, that's contraindicated for ozone therapy because we're using heparin in the process. The other things are kind of just boilerplate. Pregnancy, being drunk, the scientific term being acute alcohol intoxication, but if they're drunk, it's not good for them. Anemia and blood clotting issues. And then under here, I have to consider G6PD deficiency. And the reason I say consider is because G6PD deficiency basically will indicate that they won't tolerate ozone therapy as well. However, I don't really know any doctors that are actually testing for G6PD deficiency, because if you started off at a low enough schedule, you'll see how they respond to it. And even with G6PD deficiency, they can still handle small doses of ozone therapy. And so if you follow our titration schedule that you'll get, you will start them off at the bottom. And then if you push up and you find that they're a little bit fatigued the next day, listen to them, understand what they're doing. Then that might mean you need to either maintain, dial it back until they can tolerate it, and then you move forward. Ozone therapy does need to be respected. It's a very powerful therapy. So the biggest area that people get into trouble is if they have somebody with a very burdened immune system, say it's Lyme disease, mold toxicity, and they haven't started putting together all the lifestyle factors that they need to with binders and detox and those things, and you give them ozone therapy, well, what's going to happen? You're going to stimulate their immune system. And then what happens? Well, the immune system kills off all the pathogens. And then what happens to the pathogens? Well, those release a lot of endotoxins, and that happens at the same time. And if they're not able to dispel those and get them out of their body, it can make them feel pretty sick. It can have flu-like symptoms for up to a week. So the titration schedule is super important because you'll avoid, you're much more likely to avoid a Herxheimer reaction like that. And you'll see how people are responding as you go up. So just keep that in mind. And people do have benefit at the lower titration schedules and working up. So the biggest thing though, and the most common, is somebody who is sensitive or very sick. Just start them low and go slow. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I have tons of information on lots of different indications. I just want to give you an overview, and then you can follow the resources. You'll get access to a course after this, 100% free. You'll get a coupon that's 100% off. I would recommend, if you really want to deep dive on ozone therapy, go ahead and go through that course. And then once you buy the equipment, of course, we'll do a one-on-one too, and I can cover more stuff there. But everybody has different practices and things, so I don't spend a lot of time here. Like I said, the three things are chronic disease, biohacking, and performance enhancement. But as far as indications, we're covering viral infections, bacterial infections, joint pain, inflammatory conditions, circulation conditions, autoimmune diseases, eye diseases, skin disorders, respiratory diseases. So doesn't cover everything, but we have a lot of resources outside of this. And again, if you get that email and you have a question, please just email me. It might take me a couple days right now, but I will get back to you. So how to do IV ozone. Again, you'll get an email with the protocol, with videos, with different stuff. I recommend going through that course for sure, because that has a great practical demonstration, and Dr. in Auburn doing a presentation on ozone therapy. But how we do IV ozone is we prep the bag with 120 cc saline. It doesn't really matter how much saline you use. The primary purpose of that is to prevent the blood from clotting. It just makes the process go easier. So you can add more saline. You can add 200, 300, 400, whatever. It's just 120 cc's for 200 ml of blood is kind of more on the lower end of things. And it says 5,000 units of heparin on here. Again, that's something you can play with. You can do down to 1,000 if you prefer and use more saline. But with what I'm demonstrating here, it's 120 cc saline and 5,000 units of heparin. The 5,000 units of heparin is basically saying, I don't want to deal with clotting issues. And the clotting issues aren't too much of a problem. Sometimes that means you need to flush the line. Sometimes that means you need to repoke, and it varies from patient to patient. So some patients are, most patients, I would say, extremely easy, but you'll have probably like 10% that there's, some sort of troubleshoot that needs to happen depending on how much heparin and saline that you're doing. So you prep a bag, you establish an IV into the patient, and you hook it up to the bag that has been prepared. Then we're going to draw blood into that bag. Now there's two ways to draw the blood out. My personal preference is a gravity feed. And what that means is we put a sterile drape cloth either on the floor or something below the arm of the patient, and then we allow gravity to pull blood into the bag. That's my preference, because the alternative is a blood pump. Now, you do whatever makes sense for your clinic. I say my preference because there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's just whatever you prefer. With the blood pump that's on the IV pole, the line is put into the blood pump, and you set it to go, and then it pulls the blood up into the bag. From there, we clamp and hang the bag above the patient. That's assuming it was on the drape cloth. And then we're going to mix in our ozone gas at 55 gamma. So we're going to mix 1 part of gas to 1 part of blood. So I have 200 ml of blood, I do 200 ml of gas. That's kind of a standard dosing range. But essentially, I don't need to cover that. So from there, you'll gently rock the bag until it turns bright red. That's a really cool part. So I would definitely recommend taking advantage of this, because it is a great visual for the patient, gives them a better experience. If they see their blood turn bright red, we're pulling out of a vein, so it's going to be dark red. And once it's bright red, it's just a great experience for the patient. And then you drip the blood back to the patient and remove the IV and place the bandage. So rocking the bag back and forth, that only takes like 20 seconds for that blood to turn bright red. As far as frequency, generally, this is speaking more to chronic disease, but generally 6 to 12 treatments is normal. Doing more is great if they're able to. You can do as many as you want, but there is a caveat with frequency as far as you do 1 to 2 times per week. So you generally don't exceed that. But one thing to keep in mind with ozone therapy is that doing 3 IV ozone treatments is not 3 times better than 1. It's more like 5 or 6 times better because it has a compounding effect. So if I told you, hey, I want you to do 6 ozone treatments, don't space that out throughout the year. Space it in 6 to 12 weeks so that you can get a better benefit from doing the ozone therapy because it's compounding. Does that make sense? All right, so we need to understand the business side of it. We understand a little bit about ozone therapy, what it's doing, that it's safe and all that good stuff. But from a practitioner angle, you need to understand how this makes sense in your business. So how can you help people and make $300,000 in 5 years on a $3,000 investment? Well, that sounds pretty good. 100 times your return. I wish I could do that more often. So what's the pitch to the clinics? $3,000 gets you everything you need as far as the equipment. Patient outcomes are improved. There's a current market of patients for it. We've done a ton of education. I've been geared pretty heavily for the past 4 years towards patients. I was kind of doctors, patients, and coming back to doctors a little bit more because we've educated probably through podcasts and different stuff over 1 million people at this point. And so there's more patients than the doctors are currently able to administer for. So there's more patients seeking out ozone therapy than there are clinics. We have people contacting us every day looking for a clinic near them, and a good portion of the time we can't find one. So the cost per treatment is $20 to the clinic or less. You get to charge $200 to $300 per treatment. Again, this is on a 40-minute time frame, so you can factor in your labor to that. And if you run 2 to 4 at one time, you can kind of figure out what the margins are. In our average clinic, this is just average. So if you're above average, you'll be more than this, but our average clinic adds $60,000 in revenue immediately per year just by offering this. So to me, it seems like a no-brainer. You know, I understand this stuff. I'm trying to lay it out in a way that makes sense, but this is really what is on the table for you guys. A few $1,000, patients get better, you make more money, everybody wins. I win because I get to sell the stuff. You win because you get to make money and help people, and the patient wins because their life is improved. So all around a win-win-win. So to recap, cost very little, people get better, super easy to do, you make more money. These are some of our current clients. Obviously, we have a lot more. These were just some that came off the top of my head, but a lot of cool people that we've worked with. This is just kind of to build a little bit of credibility with you guys if you're familiar with any of these people, but a lot of awesome people. All right. So how to get started with ozone therapy in your clinic. Again, I said this training is intended to give you an overview of ozone therapy so that you conceptually understand it. It is not meant to give you the practical hands-on training. The reason is because you want to wait till you have the equipment, because for me to tell you is much worse than actually showing you with your own hands what you do. So the next step is buy the equipment, and then from there we'll do training and we'll get it all sorted out as far as the practical side. Again, $3,000 gets you everything you need. I'll show you how to do it, how to set it up. I'll show you how to do IV ozone. I'll show you the other IV supplies you need. A lot of it doesn't come from us. You know, you'll have your medical supplier and that kind of thing. On the equipment, there's a 6-month money-back guarantee, lifetime warranty, and free IV ozone course. That's kind of the offer on the table. Yeah, I'm happy to hear from you guys. It's Q&A time, discussion time, whatever you want it to be. So
yeah, so I have a couple questions. I think I spoke to you a little bit at the IV Biz Bash, but I'm all mobile. I'm in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you have customers in Pennsylvania. But I mean, I'm assuming it's legal in Pennsylvania because I do see that there are a few practitioners that offer it, the 10 pass. But how practical is this for a mobile IV company?
I'd say it's pretty practical. So you have your oxygen tank and the generator. Let me see if I have a good picture first. So I'll go back to that picture real quick. We are building a case, but that won't be ready for about 6 months. And the case will basically be like, oh, you just pick up the case and go. But you're already going to have your IV pole and your other stuff. So this is the size of the equipment. You can see a syringe on there. You can see a glove. This is the oxygen tank. Oxygen tanks can be as big or as small as you want. So that's the nice thing. And since we're only pulling out 200 mil at a time, an oxygen tank is going to last a very long time. So I would say it's pretty mobile. I'm not sure how restrictive it is for you as far as like, do you already have a full van or car or whatever, but you're looking at it like a little box this size for the generator, essentially. And then you have your oxygen tank, and that's about it, other than your disposable supplies.
Micah,
Yeah.
quick question for you. We talked about a silicone-based syringe.
Yep.
What is that priced at, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I think it's in the 250 for a single syringe, and it gets down to like 150 depending on bulk.
Okay, perfect.
So
Thank you.
in that ballpark, it's about $1 more than your syringe if you're buying in bulk.
Which is totally fine, all things considered. Now, as
Yep.
far as maintaining consistency and continuity in your training and moving forward with our team of nurses, we obviously are bringing on new nurses continuously throughout the year, and we want them to have the highest level of training and or what have you. Is there going to be material you believe in the near future that can be given to those that have joined the Simply 03 group that
100%.
we can then, something that we can make sure that we're not missing the mark and that it doesn't get, our trainings don't get diluted over the years?
So there's the course, which is kind of like the in-depth, you understand everything about ozone therapy. It gives a lot of information. Yeah, essentially that gives opportunity for feedback and custom questions. And I think it's way better. Next year, we're dialing up regional events. I don't know how many we'll do next year, but probably in 2024, we'll have 10 to 15 per year across the United States. So that's a great way to do it. You can also hire us to fly out to your clinic and train everybody. So there's options there. Obviously, there needs to be knowledge about doing IVs already. We're not going to train people on how to start an IV or anything like that. But as long as they know that, we generally don't have any issues getting anybody started.
Awesome. And then last question that I have, I imagine this is incorporated, but I'm going to ask anyway. Point of contact. We have accessibility to a point of contact at all times if for questions or what have you.
Yep, we're currently building out an infrastructure for it. So as of now, I am the point of contact for doctor training. So what I'm going through right now is we've reformed our structure to how we're doing these, and I am building out the process and then going to hire it in. So in 2 months, I'm not going to be touching any of this. But for
Understood.
now, I'm involved in the process, and you'll get notified if there's a switchover and who the point of contact is. We're going to bring in some nurses that are like full-time support.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Micah, Vaughn here.
Hey.
It was great seeing you. You did a fantastic job at Biz Bash. I think you left, obviously, by the participation here, some type of impression on some people. So one of my questions is that I saw in your people that you've serviced working with Broncos. I take that's the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, through the IV code. So the IV code was at one point giving IVs to the Denver Broncos team.
So my question is, and I'm speaking towards the world of sports. What can we address, or what could we market to, or who can we market to for this therapy, and which of the therapies are best aligned with that kind of treatment for athletes and athletics?
IV is the best. Rectal insufflation is the most value. So it's a little bit tough to convince a professional athlete to do an enema though. So it's like, but it's the most valuable. And the reason is because you're still getting a systemic response. You can do it in under 5 minutes per day. And the time commitment on that is just so low, as opposed to an IV for somebody that's busy. They have to dedicate travel time to do the therapy and get out. But yeah, you were asking kind of questions about marketing though. I mean, you're understanding, how do I position this to athletes? Is that your question?
Yeah. What would tickle their fancy in respect to putting stuff out there to get their attention in the world of sports?
Well, so I would say this, that the number one thing that triggers people's ideas about ozone, because I've been doing this stuff for a really long time and nobody's really cared until like a year ago. So it's like nothing has changed. But like what has happened is people are seeing somebody they perceive as credible doing ozone therapy, and therefore that treatment is now credible. So if you have an athlete base or any sort of athlete base, give them IV ozone for treatment, get your best one. So I know you're in Michigan. I was going to say Matt Stafford, but he's not there anymore. So let's just say you had a high profile athlete, get that guy in, or the highest profile you in, and a couple others, give them IV ozone treatments, record them. And what that's going to do is other people are going to see somebody they perceive as credible doing ozone therapy, and that's going to go the furthest by a long shot. That's going to do much better than saying this is going to improve your oxygen efficiency, microcirculation, all that kind of stuff. Even though all that stuff is true, you have to give people what they want so you can give them what they need. And so I would say that's the number one strategy, if possible for you. And then behind that, I would say just education about what it's doing in the body, how it's helping, informing them on what they will most likely experience with doing ozone therapy. So saying you should notice a general sense of wellness throughout the day, reduced brain fog if you have any. You're not going to notice a huge uptick in energy. You'll just feel good. But then if you go and exercise, you'll notice that you fatigue a lot less quickly if you did IV ozone first. Two, that this IV launch company that we're doing a little bit of a partnership with might be able to help out with some of the marketing angles to things and actually getting people in the door. So if you're paying attention to my emails, I try to deliver on value. And we're actually doing a webinar with them next week, and they're going to walk through their marketing process and their offer. So
awesome. Thanks.
Hey, Micah, this is Dominique. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I met you at the biohacking conference.
Yeah.
So quick question. We right now working with exosomes, kind of echo back on the last question with a lot of professional athletes. I'm actually on with the Chargers right now. We're dealing primarily with exosomes treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had a lot of, and we're looking to add potentially ozone therapy in conjunction with the exosomes? Have you dealt with a lot of those cases where it kind of optimizes the results using ozone and exosomes?
We have a partnership with, we should say loose partnership with VD Labs, which is a stem cell company. And I have a fantastic resource for you, Dr. Boonder. So after this, send me an email for his contact, because he has worked with stem cells extensively in the protocols and helping to create those, and some other scientists involved with stem cells. So he knows a lot about it. My basic understanding is that we're inducing, we're getting rid of senescent cells, so cells that are not undergoing autophagy. They're not deconstructing. And so with ozone therapy, we're inducing that, we're stimulating the microcirculation. Essentially, we're creating a better platform for, and it's a good therapy in and of itself, but creating a better platform for the stem cells to take place. So by that logic, essentially you get more bang for your buck with the stem cells if you do an ozone treatment. And that applies to the joint injections too. You can do ozone joint injections, but let's say you have a bum knee that has a partial tear in it. You can push in ozone through a needle like 3 to 5 times leading up to the stem cell treatment, quit 2 days before, and then do your stem cell treatment. It'll take a lot better.
Gotcha. Okay. Does any of the machine have a timer, or that's not a very common feature on ozone generators?
That's not a very common feature. I can say we are building out a different generator. It'll come out mid 2023, but it'll be touchscreen, all automated. So you'll say like, I want to fill up this syringe, or I want to do major autohemotherapy, and it'll automatically dose exactly what you need. So from a practicality standpoint, that'll be easier. Functionally though, this stuff works fine in a clinic. The biggest thing is if you have 2 rooms that you're operating separately, it can be a pain to go back and forth. So maybe 2 machines, but it just kind of depends on your clinic. But yeah, functionally, I don't really run into issues with like a timer or multiple syringes at once. I know some other companies have features here and there, but usually it's based around a protocol. So with like a timer, you'll have one on EBU. We're making an EBU machine, which is this protocol that's drawing out large amounts of blood, has in the middle, the ozone is it's timed therapy. So there's a timer built into it. But
Gotcha.
And then next step, if you're looking to get started, buy equipment.
Micah.
Yeah.
Can I throw in a quick plug real quick? We're going to be incorporating you guys very soon here, and hope to be launching with Simply 03 relatively soon. We're we're going to pretty much spread this as fast as we can.
Yeah, I'm excited. I view a lot of the people that we work with as partners, and, you know, we're a support agent. You know, my job is to support you guys. So I want to do that as well as possible. And I just love working with everybody. So again,
Awesome.
Thanks guys so much. I appreciate your time, and just send me an email if you need anything.
Thanks, Micah.
Yep. We'll see you.